Hey there, and welcome to the Understanding Bollywood, Knowing India podcast, where we explore the ways in which Bollywood cinema connects to the Indian cultural landscape and defines citizenship. I am Wick Perry, joined today by,
Srihari Das.
we will be covering the 2001 Karan Johar film Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gham, otherwise stylized as K3G. For our listeners who might be a bit unfamiliar with the genre, would you be able to give us a quick definition of what Bollywood is?
Yeah, so Bollywood is essentially Hindi language cinema, and it covers a wide array of topics that range from like combating patriarchal power to even combating cultural norms. Essentially, Bollywood cinema teaches people how to act in the face of some adversities and honestly come out as the ideal citizen of India.
It seems that a lot of those themes are pretty, I'd say, present in the film we're going to be talking about today. I also want to ask if you could give me a quick rundown of what this film is about.
Yeah, so essentially, this is a film about family and how, well, partially about how blood is not necessarily thicker than water. So our main characters are, or at least our main active characters are Yash, Nandini, and Rahul. So Yash is the father and the patriarchal figure, and Rahul is his adopted son. Now, Rahul grows up and they have a great family bond, but when he essentially marries outside of his class against the will of his father Yash, Yash disowns his son, and Rahul is forced to flee out of India into the UK. So for 10 years, this kind of separation happens until they finally meet up again. And Nandini finally has enough. And she tells Yash that he's wrong for separating the family, that he's not a god and he's not always right. So, and essentially this film gets resolved finally when Yash and Rahul finally come together, and then they realize that they have to be a family, and their love, even things said in anger, can persist.
I wonder if, despite the common trope in Keijo films for families to come together and always stick together no matter what, if in that scene where Nandini is confronting Yash about his behavior, telling her how to think and when not to talk, if instead of her giving in immediately whenever he apologizes, that she asks him for a divorce, goes through with that whole process and ends up, say, finding a new life or a new set of friends and volunteering for a nonprofit. And her life is completely separate from him. Her life is full and she's able to express herself freely, whereas he would have otherwise kept her from doing so.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be very different. Nandini's position on that one would definitely be a lot better for her well-being, especially since she was separated from her son for so long. And you could definitely see in the film how much it had taken a toll on her and even on her relationship with Yash. You can see that Yash is always saying it hurts way more when people who seem close to you are actually feeling very distant. And you can see the strain on their relationship throughout most of the film until finally the end. So I think that, at least for Nandini, that her divorce from Yash at that point is really helpful for her. She's going to become a lot more independent and autonomous. She no longer has to like bend to Yash's will at all.
And as far as wives being expected to bend to their husband's wills, I understand that the concept of an ideal wife is just that someone who listens to their husband, does exactly what they say. And in most Hindu relationships, there isn't really that concept, I guess, of divorce, and that most people would rather stay with the person that they're with.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if her in this hypothetical asking for the divorce is kind of a power play in a sense to, go above her husband, who is the one that, in a sense, should be taking control, and she is taking back this control. What does that say?
I think that definitely makes her one of the ideal citizens of India. I think that shows how she's willing to question the people who have, or at least who seem to have power over her. And definitely, I think that you can relate that to just being an ideal citizen of India in general, as like willing to question like government authority, even though they have so much power over the rest of the citizens. And that questioning is going to essentially lead to the betterment of the family, and in that case, even the country. So I think that would just make her an even better citizen, and honestly, just make her an ideal person.
I feel like we could go even further with that, kind of going back on my own point here about Keijo films, upholding this whole thing of families need to communicate in order to thrive, but
Mhm.
that communication doesn't have to be just agreeing with one another all the time. It can be disagreeing also. And it also seems to be that there's a clear difference in the way that Yash treats Nandini as opposed to the way in which Rahul treats his wife, Anjali, because he never seems to do this sort of thing where he's saying, "Hey, you have to think the way that I think." There are a couple scenes where he gets pretty upset, but he does seem to listen after a while, and there are a lot of points where Anjali is calling the shots. I think that's a
Ye
nice little reversal of roles there.
yeah, I think it's really cool, and I think a lot of the scenes and, like, bring in the humor as well. You see Rahul, like, trying to one up Anjali, but then Anjali's, like, showing who really wears the pants and, like, who she makes a scary face and he, like, backs down for a second. Like, I think it's really funny to see that dynamic between the two of them, and it honestly shows how healthy of a relationship that they have, where they can be make jokes with each other and disagree with each other in healthy ways, as opposed to the relationship between Yash and Nandini, where they kind of just like stay distant with each other unless they're not fighting.
And their relationship towards the end of the film, this is going a little bit away from the hypothetical in which she divorces him, but you brought up earlier before we began recording this deleted scene in which we get a little bit of a different side of their relationship.
Yeah, so in this scene, I'm not sure if we can relate this back to the film and whatnot, or whether it's meant to be for everyone's eyes, but we see Rahul and Yash both leaving to go for work, and they're saying goodbye to Anjali and Jay's character Nandini. And we see Rahul blows a kiss to Anjali, and Yash is just kind of like looking at him. He's like, "Wait, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that's a nice thing to do for my wife." So he blows a quick kiss to his wife as well. And it kind of just shows like Yash still has to learn how to, show his love for not just his son, but his wife as well. And you kind of just see Yash still has a lot of growing to do for himself in order to be a better husband, father, and honestly just patriarch in general for the rest of the family.
I am a bit curious as to where this scene fits in. I'm assuming this is after the reunion of
Yeah, this is
everyone.
definitely after the reunion. I think it's after like the end of the film or whatever, where they finally come back together as a family and everything. So I think that's how it goes. Or maybe I'm not sure actually where it exactly fits in. It could be that, or it could
Mm,
have been some sort of dream or something. But
kind
uh,
of am unsure about that now, how I could even tie that in. Um, because obviously her in this hypothetical divorcing him would occur before any of that.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. I definitely see how that's kind of hard to tie in. We see that like we said that Yash needs some like growing to do in terms of like
mm,
showing affection for his family and his wife, but that's not to say that Nandini didn't have some growing to do as well. She definitely needed to, embrace more of her own like thoughts and kind of like
Mm,
take initiative really for what she wanted, especially if she wanted to keep her family together or at least be able to see her sons, both of them, and have like a happy life with them. But
mm,
she kind of remained quiet, and in the film we can see that she was definitely the deciding factor, really, because in the face of everything, we see Rohan was talking to Yash and he was still not budging on his decision. But it was finally when Nandini came back and started really speaking her mind that Yash finally changed his decision, or like rather changed his mind. And we can see that like had Nandini maybe had done that earlier, or even just like taken initiative and like taken action against Yash there, it might none of this might have happened and they might not have had such a long gap where they didn't see each other. So I think definitely there were two things where Nandini needed to be more proactive and Yash needed to just show his affection and show his love for everyone a little bit better.
I think that we have covered some pretty decent ground today, especially with this hypothetical, in understanding a bit more about what this film has to say.
Yeah, definitely. I think in one of our readings for this week, it also mentioned how J.S. Bachchan's character Nandini was kind of the person who came and was the person who changed everything. And I definitely see how that could definitely be in the same scenario how Jaya Bachchan's character Nandini here, by divorcing Yash and everything, she kind of takes control of her own life and
Mhm.
she kind of makes her so that she has access to like her whole family. Access is kind of like a bad word to use, but I think she has more ability to see her son, both of her sons, and her entire family. So I think that really helps.
Definitely with Yash being sort of authoritarian, traditional type guy, he's definitely not gonna be the one that wants to change, at
I
least not on his own. Nandini is definitely the catalyst
Yes,
for
that's the
so
perfect
much of the
word. Yeah,
film. Mhm.
agree.
And it doesn't really seem too much of a stretch to see her filing for divorce in a hypothetical like this.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sure we both learned a lot, and everyone who's listening has learned a few new things, some fresh takes, if you will, about this film, and is able to understand it a little bit better by our discussion.
Yep. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all.